Buongiorno a tutti e grazie per essere qui presenti. Attendiamo questo minuto nel frattempo che tutti gli altri si collegano per iniziare a darvi il benvenuto a questa sessione. Siamo molto contenti e onorati di fare questo webinar perché è una delle prime volte nel quale andiamo a presentare una delle soluzioni che abbiamo a portafoglio da poco. E inizio a presentarmi. Grazie a tutti, io sono Cristina Ferrazzi e all'interno di Sistematica ricopro il ruolo di Business Development Manager per le tecnologie emergenti. Ed ecco appunto una delle tecnologie emergenti che abbiamo scelto con più cuore in quest'ultimo periodo, che è appunto Safety. Safety è una soluzione di Zero Trust, ma che andrà a delinearci meglio Giuseppe Urso e Itai. La sessione di oggi prevederà una piccola spiegazione e un'introduzione da parte di Giuseppe, che ci aiuta soprattutto nel supporto con la lingua italiana, e poi andremo nel dettaglio con Itai. Voi avete disponibilità di poterci fare domande con il Q&A e vi invitiamo soprattutto, visto che è un nuovo prodotto e perciò magari ci possono essere nuove curiosità o dubbi e domande, a scrivercele in chat in modo tale che poi gli potremo dare una risposta. A questo punto direi che posso lasciare la parola a Giuseppe e vi ringrazio.
Grazie Cristina. Come ha detto Cristina, mi chiamo Giuseppe Urso, sono account manager in safety per Spagna, Portogallo e Italia. Prima di iniziare volevo ringraziarvi per assistere a questo webinar. In questo periodo è veramente difficile incontrare un buco nell'agenda per poter assistere a questi webinar. Comunque l'idea di oggi, con l'aiuto del mio collega Itai, è esporre un po' l'evoluzione delle VPN in questa triste realtà che stiamo vivendo e come la tecnologia Zero Trust può aiutarci in questa transizione. Bene, che cos'è la sicurezza Zero Trust? Zero Trust è un modello di sicurezza di rete basato su un rigido processo di verifica delle identità. Il sistema prevede che solo gli utenti e i dispositivi autenticati e autorizzati possano accedere alle applicazioni e ai dati, proteggendo al contempo le applicazioni stesse e gli utenti da avanzate minacce su Internet. Zero, la piattaforma che vedremo a continuazione con il mio collega, è una piattaforma Zero Trust as a Services di safety costruita sui migliori standard di sicurezza Zero Trust del mercato. Permette di rendere sicuro l'accesso dei vostri collaboratori e fornitori alle risorse di rete, applicative e cloud, proteggendo così le risorse con maggiore valore delle aziende. Non richiede nessuna configurazione manuale da parte del cliente, è scalabile e si integra in modo trasparente con le infrastrutture del cliente, indipendentemente dalla dimensione che abbiano. Eliminare quindi le VPN non è semplicemente un'opzione praticabile, ma sta diventando indispensabile, credo, per quattro fattori dell'ambiente aziendale moderno. La mobilità della forza di lavoro, l'ecosistema digitale diversificato, la migrazione sul cloud e il panorama delle minacce. Un modello che funzionava 20 anni fa non può essere considerato attendibile oggi. Questo è stato ripetutamente dimostrato dal numero sempre crescente di attacchi informatici che abbiamo registrato nel 2020. In più, con una forza di lavoro sempre più remota e mobile in tutto il mondo, fornire agli utenti un accesso semplice e sicuro solo alle applicazioni di cui hanno bisogno per svolgere il proprio lavoro, indipendentemente dalla località e delle ubicazioni, è sempre più importante. Okay? Quindi eliminando l'impegno delle VPN, effettuando una migrazione dell'accesso remoto a una piattaforma Zero Trust, pensiamo della safety che l'azienda realmente può risparmiare tempo e denaro. Bene, prima di passare la parola al mio collega vorrei concludere semplicemente con una... io credo che le organizzazioni globali non sono più vincolate dalle inefficienze e le vulnerabilità delle VPN, sono disponibili soluzioni più veloci, semplici e sicure per bloccare tutte le porte del firewall in entrata e fornire l'accesso remoto solo alle applicazioni specifiche di cui gli utenti finali abbiano bisogno. l'epoca dell'accesso inutilmente ampio a tutta la rete è finita. È venuto il momento di separare l'infrastruttura della vostra azienda da internet, minimizzare la superficie di attacco, nascondere le applicazioni dell'esposizione pubblica su internet e implementare in pochi minuti una soluzione moderna basata in Zero Trust. Tutto quello che ho detto lo vedremo a continuazione con i temi. Okay? Come ha detto Cristina, se poi alla fine avete delle domande da fare, noi siamo qui a vostra completa disposizione. Itai, please, could you start with your presentation?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. We can get started. And obviously, we're going to be switching to English. Wonderful. Okay, just can you see it? Just want to confirm?
We can see
Okay.
it. And
Okay.
in case there is some question or there is some point that are not clear for the language, I can try to explain it in Italian, okay?
Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Itai. I'm with Safety. I'm the VP of Customer Success. And today we're going to be doing an overview of Zero Trust in general, as well as our solution, and specifically how it relates to the rise of cyber attacks over the past year. But before we get started, I want to introduce Safety just a little bit. So Safety's been a player in the Zero Trust network access space for pretty much since its inception. So we've been here since 2013. And we're a publicly traded company, customers worldwide, enterprise customers of all sizes. We're global. We have offices in the US. We have offices in Europe and Spain, in Germany and Israel. And we work with hundreds of channels worldwide to get our reach all over the world. And we've been well covered as well. So I don't know if you follow analysts, specifically Gartner. If you look at it, since 2018, we're virtually in every report that has anything to do with ZTNA or Zero Trust network access. They don't have a magic quadrant for it just yet, but with any kind of coverage that they've had, we've been a reference vendor. So we really have been around here since the beginning of the rise of Zero Trust. We service customers from all verticals, again, all over the world. So we have fintech company, financial sector, large corporations, government entities, healthcare and education. Again, we try to be as widespread as we can, and our technology and Zero Trust in general is obviously relevant to virtually every type of organization out there. So there's no just specific one space that we focus on. And what I would like to do before we get started with anything safety is kind of do a recap of cyber attacks over the past year, specifically in the age of COVID-19. So there's an interesting statistic that actually shows that in the first half of 2020, we've had a similar number of cyber attacks as the entirety of 2019, which is actually not very surprising if you consider the coronavirus, right? So we've had a massive transition of people used to working from the office, now working from home. There's no perimeter anymore to an organization, so we're virtually everywhere. And if you look, we kind of designed this timeline here. We handpicked some of the attacks that got the biggest headlines, that were the biggest ones, and the various types. So we have ransomware attacks, we have data breaches, we have credential theft, and the most interesting one, I think, and that's a new type of attack that's been the primary focus for attackers, is what we call a VPN attack. And again, that is primarily because of the massive shift of people working remotely and from home. So we're going to be drilling down to three specific attacks, arguably the biggest ones. One of them is the Pulse Secure attack that happened in an Israeli insurance company. We're going to be looking at the University of San Francisco in the attack that they've had. And we're going to be looking at SolarWinds, the SolarWinds Orion attack that really really got a lot of headlines and made a lot of head spins. It really had us reconsider what's possible in terms of an attack surface. So we're going to start with the Pulse Secure attack. Happened again for Surebit. It's an Israeli insurance company. And if we look at what happened there, hackers utilized a vulnerability in the actual VPN. That's the type of VPN attacks that I've been mentioning before. So hackers actually found a vulnerability on the Pulse Secure VPN gateway itself, and they've used the vulnerability to gain access into the corporate network. By the way, if you think about it, a VPN gateway is the one thing that you have to compromise to get access to an entire network, which is a flawed security strategy to begin with. So once they've gotten access to the network, from there, they started accessing file servers, steal sensitive corporate data. So in this case, they didn't encrypt it, so it wasn't necessarily a ransomware attack in that sense. What they did was they've threatened to release that private information. So obviously they wanted to be paid, and the organization, Surebit, the company, they didn't agree to pay the ransom. And what happened is that they actually did, the attackers, they actually did leak the information. So they ended up leaking personal ID numbers, which is like a social security number in Israel, passport numbers of high-profile people, medical information of customers. And don't have to tell you, this was very bad, right, for multiple reasons. So think about the reputation for the company, the publicity, and the potential bad use of the stolen information that was leaked. So that was all over the news for for a long time, almost every day. Another attack that we can look at is the one that occurred at the University of San Francisco, and that was really your classic ransomware attack. And this one happened with phishing. So essentially, all an attacker had to do, they just sent an email containing a link. They had one or more people just click on the link, follow it, and the ransomware was downloaded and started propagating through the network. So eventually what happened was that a $1.14 million ransom was in fact paid, but that didn't even help with the damage that it's caused, right? So we still have the reputation, we have bad press, we have brand hit, we have information that was stolen. Specifically, some of it was COVID-19 research, because that's what the University of San Francisco was doing at the time. So, and that's why they ultimately decided to pay, because the information was valuable. So we have a financial loss, we have a brand hit, bad press, and leak of sensitive information. And finally, probably the biggest one is, we've seen in years, by the way, is the Solarwinds hack. And this time, instead of hacking the actual organization, what happened is the platform, the SolarWinds Orion platform itself, which is, by the way, used by more than 18,000 organizations around the world, has been hacked, has been compromised. And what the attacker managed to do is inject their own malicious code into their update platform. So it basically opened the door for attackers to log into the network of anyone who's running that vendor's appliance, the SolarWinds appliance. And that's exactly what happened. It was a serious brand hit. It is estimated, the damage is estimated at over $100 billion. And you can imagine, if you were running a SolarWinds Orion appliance, how would you feel, and would you ever trust it again? And how worried you would be about the information that could have been potentially stolen. So if we look at those types of attacks, and these are 3 different types, they all have something in common. So there's a commonality to them, and it is what we call, they all use an attack stage. So if we look at the attack surface of an organization, it all begins with access. It can be internal access, like a phishing attack. It could be external access. It could be a vendor appliance type of access. We always start by gaining access by exploiting a vulnerability on an attack surface to launch an attack. So any type of attack begins with access. And this is a good transition to what we bring to the market, our approach. And we call it Zone Zero. We've titled it Perimeter Access Orchestration. And what it aims to do is be intrusive to that attack surface. And what we're actually focusing on is unifying all access use cases and combine the best of breed access technology to make sure that we are in the middle of every access flow that would otherwise be compromised. It consists of reverse access, which is our patented technology, which I'll go into, SDP, which is the core of zero trust network access in general, software-defined perimeter, VPN access, and multi-factor authentication. These are basically the four things that we're addressing with the platform. The idea behind the platform is, again, we're going to be sitting right between all the entities, all the constituents that interact with an organization, and that can be devices, IoT devices, could be corporate employees working from home, third-party vendors, remote workers, contractors, supply chain, mergers and acquisitions. Doesn't matter how they're logging in, how they're getting access, we're going to be in the middle, and we're going to be making sure that there is no attack surface for them to compromise. If we look at the high-level architecture, the idea is to be a virtual container hosting 3 different components within it that are designed to separate the authentication from access and make sure that we continuously re-authenticate users, and we don't just assume that a user is to be trusted just because they're on the network, just because we know their login identity, or just because they're logging in from a specific location. The core of the solution, or the biggest component, is the Zone Zero access controller. And you can see that it's depicted that it has access to all the corporate backend resources. Thanks to our reverse access technology, it's completely separated from everything else that is user-facing, and we're going to be diving into that a little bit. And the 2 other components are the Zone Zero authentication gateway and the Zone Zero access gateway. So we separate the authentication from access. And the entire platform, as I've mentioned, is built upon our patented technology that we call reverse access. So reverse access is a technology that enables us to provide access while logically segmenting the network in a way that we only need outbound network connections to establish connectivity between a user and an application. Essentially, the way that it works, see, we have our access gateway in the middle, we have our access controller all the way in the back end. And when a user sends a request that is designated to a business application that's within the network, it actually gets to our access gateway. It is terminated there. And access controller, which is behind a firewall that is closed at all times, reaches out, picks up the request, sends it to the application, gets the response, and pushes it back to the user. So we don't have anything that's initiated inbound. It's always handpicked. We know exactly what we want to pick up. We know where we want to send it to, and then we just push a response to the user. We don't let the user interact directly with the application. So if we start with SDP, software-defined perimeter, it's been the go-to technology go-to framework for zero trust network access over the past few years. What we did with software-defined perimeter is, number one, we're basing it on our reverse access technology. So if you go ahead and deploy it, you won't even have to go through the security team asking for open inbound port. We're going to be doing everything in the most secure way behind a closed firewall, and everything is going to be outbound. We're going to separate the authentication layer from the access layer. We don't want to authenticate and get and receive access at the same location. We're going to be supporting any type of application, any TCP-based application, and we're not intrusive. So you don't have to re-architect the network like other solutions make you do. You don't have to rip and replace anything. We work in parallel with existing technologies. We're completely clientless, so makes for an really easy deployment. There are no agents, no clients to install, and you can go either fully on-prem. So if you're a highly regulated environment like a government, like military, like finance, and you can't really consume cloud services, you can go fully on-prem. If you're looking for the convenience of a cloud service, you could go with the hybrid cloud. This is essentially the way that it works. So we have users who are trying to access corporate resources. They're on the back end. They're behind closed firewalls, so there's no direct access to them. We have our authentication gateway designed to authenticate the user before they can even connect to the access gateway where they actually receive access. They have to go through an authentication process first on the authentication gateway. That process can actually be anything that they want. It could be, your classic local Active Directory credentials. It could be identity providers. It could be biometrics if we're integrating with Okta and Duo and Ping and any identity provider out there. And once we know who they are and what application or service they're trying to get to, only then will we open access for them to establish a connection to our access gateway in a native way. That means if it's an RDP session, they just open an RDP client. If it's a SQL database, they just open a SQL client. We're not intrusive to the way that they work, but they only get the ability to connect after we know who they are. This is a hybrid cloud environment you're seeing here. If you wanted to consume it as a cloud service, then basically we'll be hosting the authentication gateway and the access gateway for you. Thanks to our reverse access technology, you are not giving up control. So even if we get hacked as a cloud provider, everything is outbound from your environment. So you can't really get access back from our cloud to your environment, even if we get hacked. This is what we do, what we do with the software-defined perimeter, with SDP. Now, for users who are VPNing in, or for organizations that are not interested in replacing their VPN, they're just worried that their VPN is so overly permissive, we offer Zero Vpn. And in this case, the authentication gateway is replaced by the actual VPN that you already have. So we're not going to be replacing that, and we're not going to be affecting the ways that users interact with the environment. Essentially, what's going to happen is a user is going to connect to the VPN environment, and that can be any VPN, right? It could be Pulse Secure, it could be Cisco, AnyConnect, anything that you want. They're going to be connected to the environment, going to be authenticated. They're going to be assigned a private IP address, the same way they normally do, right? The only difference is when they log in and the VPN authenticates them, they're not really going to be on the network just yet. What's going to happen is their traffic is going to be stopped, and it's going to reach our Zero VPN server. And the VPN service itself is going to announce, basically going to send a message to our Zero VPN, just letting us know that a user has signed in to the network. And again, remember that user doesn't have any access to anything just yet. What we do is we send an additional factor of authentication to the user. And that factor of authentication actually originates from the back end of the network. That means that the user can't really interact with that service at all. So it can be compromised. Unlike a VPN gateway that the user does have access to. So if we have vulnerability on the VPN and the VPN does multi-factor, we can totally bypass that. But in this case, because the multi-factor originates from the back end, even if you compromise the VPN, Zone Zero VPN itself still going to keep you secure. So we send the multi-factor to the user responds, and Zone Zero approves the user and opens the internal firewall, or rather uses our reverse access technology to relay the traffic to the destination. So again, from a data flow, we've connected to the VPN. We've been authenticated. The traffic is routed to our Zone Zero VPN solution. And we reverse access it back to the environment on a per application level. So essentially, even if you have a flat network, we don't really give you full network access, even though you're VPN'd in. So we can control which applications, which specific services or applications you should be accessing, and we're going to limit you to just those. What we can also do is what we call re-authentication. So if you have sensitive services, sensitive applications on your network that you want to add multi-factor to, but they don't support multi-factor, or you just want to be extra careful with them, what we can do is re-authenticate even after you're logged into the environment. So essentially, you could be on the VPN and you're trying to connect to a sensitive application, even one that you're authorized to, but it's more sensitive, want to re-authenticate you. So the traffic is still routed to Zone Zero. The only difference is we detect that you're trying to consume that specific service, and we're going to hit you with another multi-factor request to your phone. Once you respond to it, we're going to pull the traffic and get it to the destination application. So again, from a user standpoint, you would just be on the VPN trying to launch an RDP connection or an SSH or a web application, whatever it is. You're going to get prompted on your phone, and you're going to have to confirm that before we ever let the traffic get to the destination. So that's VPN. So if I'm a CISO, if I'm an organization, I want to pursue a zero trust network access strategy, whether I want to go with the software-defined perimeter, whether I want to go with keeping my VPN, or I want to do a combination of the two, then we got you covered with Zone Zero. And in a very simple way, we transform the environment to true ZTNA. Now, the final piece of the puzzle is multi-factor authentication. Now, the industry has widely accepted that multi-factor authentication is something that we need to pursue. Everything should have MFA. So if you look at the market today, you're going to see that this has been the golden age for identity companies. So companies like Duo and Okta and Ping and all types of authentication companies, they've been doing really well with multi-factor. But if I wanted to have multi-factor to everything, or if I have a sensitive network share, for example, or an RDP session, or an in-house developed application that doesn't natively support MFA, there aren't really a whole lot of options for me out there. There's no easy way to do it. So the MFA adoption rate remains low for a big portion of very common services that organizations use. What we're doing with that, with the Zone Zero platform, is essentially bringing MFA on a network-triggered layer. That means we're taking the Zone Zero technology, and we sit in the middle between users and applications, and we can add multi-factor to anything on your network because we're network-triggered. That means that the application doesn't have to be aware, that it doesn't have to integrate, doesn't have to know that we're adding multi-factor to it, but we're still going to do it. We're going to authenticate the user before the traffic ever gets to the destination. So that's another form of separating the authentication layer from access layer. We're going to authenticate you first, then provide you with network connectivity to an application. So that's continuously verifying the identity throughout the session. It completely supports any type of infrastructure that you have in place. So again, we could deploy this in an hour in pretty much any environment. Doesn't matter how it's architected or if you're using VPN or anything else. And again, it's for anything, not just for web application, in-house developed applications, anything proprietary, SMB, RDP, completely seamless. You don't have to change anything. This is what it looks like. We're basically separating users from applications, making sure that the traffic flows through us. We can do it in a segmented environment, or we can do it on a flat network. So that's the beauty of it. If you've been considering going through a project of micro-segmenting your network, because you're concerned of the overly permissive nature of network access, then we're basically making that redundant. You can just put our Zone Zero appliance, and you're going to be micro-segmented logically and providing application layer access instead of network layer access. So essentially, if you look at Zone Zero as a platform, from a security standpoint, it transforms the environment into a true zero trust network access environment, whether you do it on VPN, whether you want to pursue SDP, and whether you want to address internal users with multi-factor. It is extremely simple. And again, a very lengthy deployment would probably be a couple hours, reduces your time from zero to zero trust, so you don't have to do very lengthy projects, very cost effective, it's non-intrusive, no agents, no clients, and it's really straightforward, and it's very flexible. So you can do it on-prem, can do it in the cloud. Specifically, let's take a look at those attacks that we've covered before and see how it could have been prevented if we had Zone Zero in place. So if we look at the Pulse Secure attack, that's probably the easiest one. And it happens all the time. Again, I only have to compromise one thing, the gateway, right? The VPN gateway, whatever it is. And that's exactly what happened here. If they had Zone Zero VPN in place, compromising the Pulse Secure VPN would not be enough to gain access to the network. So if they compromise the Pulse Secure VPN gateway, they would still have to go through Zone Zero VPN. They would still have to go through another factor of authentication that they don't have access to. So compromising the VPN is not enough anymore when you have Zone Zero in place. If we look at the University of San Francisco ransomware attack, they managed to get into the network and they started scanning through the network and finding network shares and file storage locations they could steal files from and encrypt. Now, if they had Zone Zero in place, we would have additional factors of authentication. We would have logical network segmentation, preventing full flat network access. And if they've managed to compromise an authorized user, they would still need to go through an additional factor of authentication that would have been sent to the user's phone. So the ransomware, even if they did get to the network, would not be able to propagate. And finally, we have the Solarwinds attack. And the concept is the same. This is really, really key here to understand that Zone Zero really gets in the middle of virtually every attack surface. So the idea is similar, right? If they manage to compromise the Solarwinds Orion server, and there is a vulnerability on the network, and somebody therefore managed to exploit that vulnerability, they managed to get on the network. From that point on, if they're trying to scan the network and to jump from one server to another, finding more vulnerabilities, they're going to be stopped by Zone Zero. It's going to prompt for multi-factor if it's an authorized user. So a user would have to authorize the connection. And if it's a non-authorized user and it's just that the network isn't as micro-segmented as we would like it to be, then we would stop it with our logical segmentation by limiting access. So with that in mind, when you have Zone Zero as a ZTNA platform, the attack surface of the organization is being dramatically reduced. We're getting in the middle of every access flow, every transaction, whether it's internal whether it's external, whether it's from a third-party vendor, they have another line of defense. And with that in mind, if anybody has any questions, that would be a good time.
Yes. So thank you for your presentation. I switch one moment in Italian just to be sure. Grazie a tutti. Adesso lasciamo spazio alle domande. Okay, we have one question that is in English. So Itai, let me know if you already read it or I tell you.
Yep, no, absolutely. I read it. I'm going to read it for everyone.
Perfect.
We have, as the solution stays in the middle between users and data, middle between users and data, would it introduce, I'm assuming, latency under heavy load? So this is the beautiful thing about Zone Zero. It is a network appliance. So we operate on layer 3 and layer 4. The latency that we introduce is no different than what you would normally get from a network appliance. So if you have an F5 or a firewall or a router in the middle, that's the kind of latency that we're talking about. And either way, when we architect the solution, we make sure that we go through sizing, right? So if you're expecting heavy load, if you are a very large network with a lot of traffic, we just build a cluster, we have more than one machine to handle the load. But in optimal environments where it's done right, users shouldn't be affected. They wouldn't even know that anything is happening.
Ok, thank you. Nel frattempo che aspettiamo, se avete anche domande, fatele pure anche in italiano, sarà nostra cura tradurle e poi... Ok, we have another one.
All right, let me see. Okay, so the question is from Roberto. Basically, with your system, we can also protect all kinds of advanced RMM system like Solarwinds, Kaseya, Ivanti, and so on, right? So the answer is absolutely yes. If it's anything that is TCP-based, we are protocol agnostic, we're application agnostic, we focus on the network layer. That's what makes it so easy to integrate, or the exact opposite. You don't have to integrate. Anything that happens over a network connection is automatically triggered by us. So any type of application that you have that you want to protect using the platform, that's exactly what it's for. That's what makes it so easy.
Ok, thank you. Come vi dicevo, appunto, se nel caso avete domande in italiano non c'è problema, le tradurremo noi. Nel frattempo, quello che vi posso dire è che comunque la scelta, e anche noi quando abbiamo analizzato questo prodotto, uno dei vantaggi è stato appunto il fatto e la facilità col quale può essere attivato e il fatto che non debba richiedere una conversione dell'infrastruttura di rete e di networking, anche perché appunto, come vi ha mostrato Itai, è anche facile metterlo anche soprattutto sopra e insieme ad una VPN, perciò possiamo dare un livello di sicurezza maggiore. A questo punto, non so Daniele se tu nel caso vuoi aggiungere altro su questo, o Giuseppe se vogliamo integrare con...
Magari forse è giusto una piccola nota infrastrutturale. Le macchine di Zone Zero sono tutte quante macchine Linux che vengono installate quando viene comprato il prodotto.
Ecco, infatti poi su questo è arrivata una domanda che poi lasceremo rispondere ai TAI. Nel frattempo noi vi diciamo anche che l'ambiente è possibile posizionarlo sia on cloud che on-prem, perciò le macchine, l'infrastruttura server sarà possibile metterla sia in una soluzione cloud che anche nella vostra infrastruttura. Itai,
facciamo rispondere Itai così almeno...
Sì, infatti. Itai, we have another question.
Yep, absolutely. Let me read it out loud for everyone. So the question is, how many servers or hardware are necessary to deploy the platform? So the platform is software only, so there's no hardware. It's all virtual appliances or VMs. And the configuration, well, depends on the use case. So it can be two servers if it's for Zone Zero VPN and we're using the VPN as the authentication gateway. That would be 2 virtual machines. With SDP, if it's a cloud service, it would be just 1 virtual machine that you have to deploy on-prem. If it's a full on-prem solution, it would be 3. So anywhere between 1 and 3, depending on the specific type of deployment, but it's all virtual.
Okay, thank you. We have another question that is in Italian, but I think that me and Giuseppe can reply directly, and it's about the licensing model. Il modello di licensing è per utente anno, e nel caso in cui la domanda è appunto esiste un modello di licensing per il service provider e qual è il livello e qual è il modello di licensing, è appunto, come vi ho detto, a utente anno, e sì, c'è anche un modello di licensing per i service provider. Poi per questo vi invito a contattarci direttamente me e Daniele. Soprattutto a fine di questa sessione riceverete un'email di ringraziamento anche con la registrazione, e lì vi invitiamo a chiederci maggiori dettagli. Ok, at the moment we don't have any other question. Giuseppe, tu vuoi aggiungerci qualcosa al riguardo?
Come ha detto Itai, una cosa importante, e una cosa che ho detto io nelle mie conclusioni, che esistono soluzioni molto più veloci per la scalabilità rispetto alle VPN tradizionali. E a parte che queste soluzioni sono semplici, sono sicure, e una cosa importante, con il nostro reverse access effettivamente si possono bloccare tutte le porte del firewall e ridurre così l'esposizione l'esposizione a internet. Praticamente tutte le porte del firewall si chiudono e si aprono solo in base alle necessità del cliente. Quindi di questa forma realmente stiamo riducendo considerevolmente il perimetro di attacco. Quindi questa è una parte fondamentale e importante della nostra soluzione. E un po' quello che ha detto Cristina e Itai, con le 2 soluzioni, con la parte di Zero Vpn, possiamo aumentare la sicurezza interna delle nostre VPN. Nel caso stiamo parlando di huge company, grandi società che non vogliono cambiare l'infrastruttura VPN per passare a una tecnologia Zero Trust. Una cosa che si potrebbe fare internamente è aumentare la sicurezza, aumentando la sicurezza con un modello Zero Trust che va insieme alle VPN tradizionali, e poi per tutte le connessioni, i collegamenti esterni, si potrebbe utilizzare la parte del software defined perimeter. In questo senso sì che stiamo riducendo tantissimo la propagazione del malware, perché evidentemente con la parte di Zero Trust ci togliamo il collegamento fisico a livello IPsec, quindi in questo senso ci togliamo la configurazione dell'endpoint. Non dobbiamo stare attenti se l'endpoint ha l'ultima versione dell'antivirus, come la connessione, il collegamento tra l'endpoint e la nostra rete solo a livello di applicazioni, la propagazione del malware praticamente è inesistente. Quindi tutti gli attacchi che si sono verificati che si sono registrati nel 2020 con soluzioni semplici di Zero Trust si potrebbero aver evitato tranquillamente. Non so se avete altre domande.
No, direi che altre domande non ne vedo. A questo punto direi che nel frattempo ringraziamo Itai per la sua presentazione, così nel frattempo vediamo se ci sono domande dell'ultimo minuto. Itai, thank you so much for your presentation and your explanation. I think that it's very important because you show us the point of the solution of safety, and I would like to thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Grazie anche a te Giuseppe per la tua presenza.
Grazie a voi, a tutti voi.
E come detto prima vi invieremo una mail riassuntiva della presentazione nel quale potrete trovare il mio contatto e così per qualsiasi dubbio o curiosità rimango a disposizione per voi. Grazie mille a tutti e buona giornata.
Grazie.
Grazie.